She stood on my porch, arms crossed, flanked by two HOA board members. "Your tone is hostile," she said, as if I'd raised my voice, when all I'd done was ask for the bylaw in writing. Then came the letter, fines, threats, a warning. But what she didn't know, my next-door neighbor, he's a defense attorney with a microphone. "My name's Eli Turner. I'm 41 years old, and I moved to this quiet cul-de-sac in Summit Grove 2 years ago with one goal: peace. After 20 years as a firefighter in Travis County, I was finally settling into early retirement. My wife, Nina, teaches second grade down the road. We've got a rescue lab named Scout, a tiny garden, and until recently a porch swing that made the whole world feel quiet for a while. I don't yell, I don't make trouble. I pay my dues, and I believed that was enough to live in peace." Then came the warnings. First, a knock about tone, then a letter about hostile behavior. I reread it 5 times, wondering if they sent it to the wrong house. The HOA was spinning my calm objections into accusations and turning my neighbors against me. But what mattered most wasn't just my name or reputation. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Kim, who'd lived here since 1987, now afraid to speak at meetings. It was the quiet way people began avoiding me, like silence could be safer than truth. And it was my daughter, Lena, who asked why no one waved back anymore. That's when I knew this wasn't about me being loud. It was about me being inconvenient. And what they didn't count on was my neighbor Marcus, who's not only a good friend, but a licensed attorney who records everything. So tell me, have you ever been labeled something you're not just for standing your ground? Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next didn't just expose a lie. It unraveled something bigger than anyone on the board expected, and we've got the tapes to prove it. The first morning I woke up in Summit Grove, it was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like the whole neighborhood had agreed to exhale at the same time. You could hear the wind moving through the pine trees and the occasional click of a neighbor's sprinkler. After 2 decades of sirens, smoke, and shattered silence, that stillness felt like a miracle. We moved in on March 12, 2023, just before spring. Nina picked the house. She fell in love with the ivy-covered mailbox and the way the sun hit the kitchen window around 8 o'clock a.m. We hadn't even unpacked all the boxes before Scout claimed his sunbeam on the living room rug. That little mutt, half lab, half mischief, had finally found a patch of peace to nap in. Every morning I'd walk Scout past the same 7 houses. The neighborhood had a rhythm. Mrs. Kim would already be pruning her hydrangeas. Mr. Alden was usually halfway through his paper in the driveway, sipping iced coffee like it was a sacred ritual. Kids rode scooters up and down the sidewalk, and everyone waved, not out of obligation, but out of comfort. It felt like we all shared something. Quiet dignity, maybe. Mutual respect. I built the porch swing myself that April. It was a small project, but it meant a lot. Nina would grade papers out there in the evening, and I'd nurse a cold tea while watching the sunset drip through the trees. When Scout wasn't asleep under my feet, he was nosing around the flower beds or trying to befriend squirrels that clearly didn't care about his good intentions. We hosted a neighborhood barbecue on June 10, 2023. Nothing fancy, just burgers, lemonade, and a speaker playing Sam Cooke from the porch. Everyone came. Even Karen Middleton from the HOA board brought her famous spinach dip and seemed almost friendly. She made a few jokes about our uncultivated flower beds, but I laughed it off. I didn't take it personally. Back then, I assumed people like her just needed to keep busy. I didn't know she was already keeping score. At the time, it all felt like progress. We'd moved into a house that felt earned, where Nina and I could finally breathe. I even joined the neighborhood garden club, more as a silent observer than anything else. But there was something grounding about soil under your nails, about coaxing life out of stubborn ground. Every small detail was a victory in a life finally slowing down. We started raising butterflies in the side yard for Lena's science project. Nina painted the front door a bold blue that Karen later called non-compliant, but only after everything had turned sour. Back then, it was just a splash of color, an expression of who we were, and I was proud of who we were. The HOA was never invisible, but it wasn't oppressive either. We'd get the occasional newsletter, reminders about trash bin placement and lawn length. It was all part of the ecosystem. I didn't agree with every rule, but I respected the idea. Shared space, shared standards. It wasn't until that first board meeting in August that I noticed the shift. It wasn't dramatic. Just a moment, a slight pause when I introduced myself. I stood, offered a comment about better storm drain coverage near the corner homes, and the air felt still. Karen gave a tight smile. One of the other board members scribbled something in a notebook. I thought maybe I'd spoken too long. After the meeting, Marcus, my neighbor from 2 doors down, clapped me on the back. "Welcome to politics," he said with a smirk. He used to be an assistant DA before he went into private practice. Calm, deliberate, sharp as a scalpel when needed. I liked him immediately. "They don't like surprises," he added, "even sensible ones." But I wasn't trying to be surprising. I was just trying to help. In September, I offered to rebuild the leaning mailbox at the edge of the cul-de-sac. It had been like that since we moved in. Cracked post, splinters, low. Okayed like it'd give up in the next thunderstorm. I didn't ask for anything. Just grabbed a fresh 4x4 from Lowe's, dug out the old concrete, and planted the new one over a weekend. 2 days later, I got an email from hoaboard@summitgrovehomes.net. Please submit all structural alterations for approval prior to making visible changes in the common space. Unapproved modifications may be subject to removal. I reread the email 3 times. They were talking about the mailbox. I responded politely, explained it was a safety repair, attached before and after photos, even noted that the HOA budget hadn't needed to cover a dime. No reply. A week later, the HOA's October bulletin referred to unauthorized repairs and aggressive conduct during committee oversight. I started to feel like I was in a play I didn't audition for. Still, I pushed it aside, tried to focus on the porch swing, on Scout's daily squirrel negotiations, on Lena's excitement when her butterfly chrysalis opened. We were still happy, still safe. That fall, the trees turned red early. Scout began sleeping a little closer at night. Marcus and I started chatting more, usually short things across the yard. Weather's shifting, or, "You see that storm drain still backed up?" It was Marcus who first noticed the language. "They're documenting you," he said one morning in November, sipping coffee like a man already prepared for the court case he hadn't filed yet. "What do you mean?" "The HOA's emails. They've started framing things. They used the word hostile in the last one." I laughed. I thought it was a typo. Then the second notice came. Then the official warning. Then the cold stares from neighbors who used to wave. Still, back then I was calm. Confused, but calm. Because I believed if I just explained myself, if I showed that I wasn't trying to break any rules, things would level out. I still believed in go. Odd faith. I hadn't yet realized that in Summit Grove, calm doesn't protect you. Silence does. And I wasn't willing to be silent anymore. I hadn't yet realized that in Summit Grove, calm doesn't protect you. Silence does. And I wasn't willing to be silent anymore. It started with a subject line. Friendly reminder. Tone in communications. It was a short email from Karen Middleton, dated November 6, 2023, sent at exactly 6:01 a.m., which already said something. The tone was clipped but dressed in polite phrases like neighborhood harmony and civil discourse. She referred to a conversation we'd had 3 days earlier where I'd asked, in what I still swear was a steady voice, why a cracked mailbox fix required formal pre-approval. In her version of events, I had raised my voice. She used phrases like visibly agitated, borderline aggressive, and disruptive to the cooperative spirit. I read the email 3 times, then I reread the HOA's mission statement on the website, fostering a welcoming, safe, and inclusive community for all residents. I hit reply, wrote 3 sentences, measured, factual, even polite, and deleted it. Then I typed a new one. Then I deleted that too. That afternoon, as I walked Scout past Mrs. Kim's porch, she gave a hesitant wave and pulled her rake in close, like I might trip over it. She didn't say anything, just looked down at her roses. By mid-November, the shift had a shape. Karen was no longer just a name on a bulletin or the bringer of spinach dip. She'd become something else, a presence. She was always watching, always near. When I mowed the lawn, I'd catch her across the street, arms crossed, lips pursed like the hedge was personally offensive to her. When Nina and I strung up Christmas lights before Thanksgiving, something we'd done for years, Karen appeared on our doorstep within 36 hours. "Just a quick heads up," she said with a sakarit. Knee smile. The HOA encourages uniformity in exterior displays until the official holiday period, December 1st through January 5th. I nodded. That a bylaw? She blinked. It's not codified, but it's tradition. I said nothing, and I didn't take the lights down. That week, another email arrived. Non-compliance, exterior aesthetic guidelines violation. It wasn't just about the lights, it included photos of our porch swing, the door color, and the flower beds Nina had planted with Lena over summer. There was no formal fine, yet, just pending board review and a warning about repeat disregard for communal aesthetic standards. But Karen didn't stop at emails. On December 2nd, I received a notice in our mailbox. Summit Grove HOA has scheduled a compliance walkthrough for your property on December 5th. No one else got one. I asked around. Marcus, Mrs. Kim, even Mr. Alden. None of them had ever received a personal walkthrough notice. Not even during the 2021 siding replacement incident when someone painted their home a rogue shade of teal. That's when Marcus said it directly. She's targeting you, Eli. You challenged her authority and now she needs to prove something. I wanted to believe that wasn't true. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, maybe a series of unfortunate coincidences layered over Karen's natural tendency toward control, but I knew better. And then came the moment I couldn't unsee. December 5th, 10:14 a.m. I was home. Nina was at work. Scout barked once, then stopped. When I looked out the window, I saw Karen walking around our yard, not on the sidewalk, not accompanied by anyone, just her, taking photos with her phone, occasionally bending to inspect things. I stepped outside. "Karen," I said, calm as ever, "is there a reason you're on my lawn?" She didn't look startled. She didn't even look up right away. Just snapped one more photo or so. Eflina's butterfly planner and stood. "This is part of the walkthrough process. As board president, I'm authorized to conduct visual inspections from public view or accessible areas." "Accessible?" I said. "This is my private property." "You didn't lock your gate," she said without irony. I stood there, jaw tight, arms crossed, mirroring her usual posture. "Leave," she smiled. "I'll note your behavior in the compliance record." I didn't respond, just watched her walk off my lawn like it was hers. Later that day, Marcus stopped by. He'd seen the whole thing from his upstairs office and decided it was time to start documenting everything. Not just because he was a lawyer, but because, as he said, this is how it starts. Quiet targeting, passive-aggressive language. They escalate, you react, then they reframe it all like you're the problem. He handed me a USB mic and a pocket-sized voice recorder. "Start carrying it," he said. "Don't confront, don't argue, just record." I nodded. But Karen had already moved to her next play. That weekend, a notice went out in the HOA newsletter, distributed via email and printed on pastel yellow paper, slid under every resident's door. The HOA board reminds residents of the importance of civility and cooperation. Recent disruptions during scheduled walkthroughs and aggressive behavior toward board members are under review. The safety of our volunteers is a top priority. No names, just implication. But implication was enough. By mid-December, the mood in Summit Grove had turned. Neighbors who once asked about Scout's limp or Lena's latest art project now gave tight smiles. Conversations cut short. Driveway greetings became head nods. Even Mrs. Kim, bless her, seemed nervous just waving. I started receiving messages through the HOA portal. "Please be advised your property has been flagged for hostile interactions. We recommend all future communications be routed through HOA Council. Failure to demonstrate cooperative intent may result in further action." Hostile. That word kept showing up. I went back and reviewed every interaction I'd had with Karen since August. Every email. Every exchange. I kept hearing Marcus's voice in my head. "They reframe it all like you're the problem." That night, I sat on the porch swing. Scout curled at my feet. The Christmas lights still twinkled, soft blues and warm whites Nina had arranged so carefully. Lena had drawn snowflakes on the front windows with chalk markers, little flakes dancing above the butterfly planter Karen had called obtrusive. And I realized something chilling. Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was weaponizing them. She'd decided I didn't belong, not because I broke any laws, but because I didn't bend when she said to, because I questioned, because I asked why. That's when I told Marcus, "Let's record everything." He nodded. "Already started," he said. "Already started," Marcus said. That should have comforted me, but what I felt wasn't relief, it was anticipation. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I knew now that one was coming, and when you know it's coming, you stop pretending you're safe. By December 18th, 2023, my HOA portal inbox had turned into a Kafkaesque museum of language, vague notices, cryptic timestamps, citations from bylaws that didn't seem to exist, at least not in the publicly available charter. I read them all. I printed them. I annotated each with a red pen like a frustrated English teacher. One notice stood out. Failure to adjust exterior lighting to community standard may result in $75 per day penalties starting 12/20/23. The offending item? A single solar-powered lantern on our back gate, something Nina had picked up for $12.99 at Home Depot. I replied, citing Section 3.6.4. Decorative lighting is permitted provided it does not emit disruptive brightness or sound. It didn't. It glowed like a lightning bug. The next day they emailed again. Your interpretation of Section 3.6.4 is noted but incorrect. Please remove the fixture. No committee, no hearing, just a voice behind a curtain telling us we were wrong. Marcus called it rule by impression. No objective law, just feelings dressed as governance. Then came the letters. Not emails. Printed letters. No return address, just typed notes slipped under our door or left in the mailbox. You're ruining this neighborhood. We used to feel safe here. Why don't you just move? They weren't signed, but one had a greasy fingerprint on the envelope and a faint smell of artificial cinnamon, the kind they used in HOA holiday wreaths. I stopped jogging in the mornings, not out of fear, but out of fatigue. Every sidewalk glance felt like an accusation. Every wave that didn't come back was a slow, aching erosion. Nina tried to stay upbeat, but I noticed the way she paused before opening emails, how she hesitated before answering the door, even for Amazon deliveries. The porch swing stayed empty for most of January. And Lena? She stopped drawing on the windows. She asked if we had done something bad. I told her the truth. We didn't, but sometimes telling the truth makes people uncomfortable. She nodded like she understood, and maybe she did. Kids know the weight of silence more than we think. On January 3rd, 2024, the first fine arrived. $150, unauthorized modification of exterior structure, swing bench. Then, every 3 days, another one, $100. Non-compliant door color, $75. Improper mailbox dimensions, $200. Hostile behavior toward board members, nonverbal. Nonverbal. I asked Marcus, how do you even defend against a fine for body language? You don't, he said. Not to them, but you document it. Then you build a case. So we did. He helped me set up a formal file, a folder on my desktop labeled Karen Doctrine. Inside, PDFs of every email, every screenshot, every photograph, every interaction Marcus managed to record on his porch mic. We had timestamps, dates, gaps between board decisions and official documentation. And most damning of all, inconsistency. Karen had cited me for lawn height violations, yet never cited her own neighbor who let crabgrass swallow half his yard. She'd warned me for porch decor, but ignored the plastic flamingos at Lot 12. When I presented this at a meeting on January 15th, I was told, enforcement is at the board's discretion. Discretion. That word kept echoing. Karen had turned the HOA into a weapon, and the ammo was discretion. Around that same time, Mrs. Kim stopped speaking altogether. She wouldn't even make eye contact at the mailbox. Later, Marcus told me she'd received a notice too, warning her about unauthorized political speech after she voiced support for me at a previous board meeting. Marcus called that retaliation. I called it proof. Meanwhile, my fines climbed past $1,000. I appealed each one formally, filing them through the HOA's complaint portal, only to receive auto-generated acknowledgments and no follow-up. So Marcus drafted a letter, a real one, printed, certified, legal letterhead. To the Summit Grove HOA Board, this letter constitutes a formal request for evidentiary hearing regarding alleged violations filed against Mr. Eli Turner. He cited Municipal Code, HOA Charter Language, and civil protections for homeowners under Chapter 209 of the Texas Property Code. It was calm, brutal, ironclad. He sent it on February 2nd, 2024. The board's reply? Silence. Until on February 7th, we received a notice. Due to ongoing disruption and refusal to comply, the board has referred this matter to external legal review. You may be subject to lien placement if fines remain unpaid. They skipped the hearing entirely. Marcus shook his head. This isn't about a swing or a light, this is targeted harassment. And he wasn't wrong, because 2 days later, a neighbor I barely knew, John from Lot 14, walked up to me at the end of my driveway. I don't want to get involved, he said, eyes shifting, but I heard something you should know. He handed me a copy of an internal HOA Slack message someone had leaked. Karen had written, "If he keeps pushing, we document everything, reframe the tone, say we felt unsafe. It's not personal, it's policy." I stared at the words, not personal, policy. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me, not rage, not panic, resolve. Because now I knew, this wasn't misunderstanding, it was strategy. I handed the printout to Marcus. "This enough?" He grinned. "It's a start." That night, I reopened the porch swing. I sat on it like a man reclaiming a small piece of ground. Scout curled up at my feet. The wind was colder, but I didn't flinch. The storm was here now. No more pretending. The pressure was real. The fines were stacking, but I wasn't cracking, because when the system counts on you folding quietly, staying calm is an act of rebellion. The wind creaked across the porch swing, but I didn't move. Scout lifted his head once, then rested it again. The leak from HOA Slack sat in my lap like a matchbook, and I knew exactly where I'd strike it. Karen had made one mistake. She assumed I was alone. But I wasn't. I had Marcus. And Marcus didn't just know the law, he lived in its shadows. He'd worked in the Travis County DA's office for 9 years, cross-examined experts, drafted state-level housing policy, argued zoning disputes in courtrooms packed with developers and angry homeowners. He'd once quashed a frivolous lawsuit mid-trial by proving the plaintiff's star witness was colorblind on the stand. Now he was watching HOA meetings through binoculars and recording everything. By February 10th, 2024, we'd built a quiet war room inside my garage. An old metal shelf held binders labeled by violation. A corkboard tracked Karen's public statements against her email timestamps. Every HOA bulletin, every altered bylaw, every unacknowledged appeal, each one pinned and marked in red Sharpie. What started as me defending a porch swing had become something bigger, a forensic timeline of abuse. Marcus's law clerk, Danielle, fresh out of UT Law, began digging through public records, and what she found changed everything. First, she discovered that Summit Grove HOA's Articles of Incorporation had not been renewed in 2022. Technically, the board was operating without updated legal status, a fact Karen had failed to mention in any of the fines, notices, or threats of legal action. Second, several of the HOA's rules hadn't been voted on or ratified properly. The official minutes showed no majority vote for the lighting policy or the exterior modification clause that had been used against me. Worse still, Danielle uncovered 3 previous complaints filed with the city against Karen herself. One was from 2019. A neighbor accused her of harassment through administrative overreach and cited an eerily similar pattern: unapproved walkthroughs, rewritten bylaws, and weaponized fines. The city had investigated, but the file had been quietly closed. Karen hadn't changed her playbook. She'd just moved neighborhoods. I looked at the paperwork spread across the garage floor and felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. We were done reacting. We were building a case. Marcus drafted an affidavit for me. It included full documentation of each HOA notice, fine, and unacknowledged appeal, a timeline of Karen's visits, emails, and public appearances, the Slack message suggesting they reframe me as a threat, voice recordings of 3 SIPAR, 8 instances where Karen made provably false claims. He also looped in a former colleague at the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs who confirmed our suspicion. Karen's pattern qualified not just as harassment, but potentially as civil conspiracy if it could be proven that other board members knowingly enabled her. That phrase, civil conspiracy, sat on my tongue like a steel coin. I started sleeping better. Not because the fight was over, but because I could finally see the edges of it. On February 18th, I filed my first formal complaint with the City Inspector General, attaching 46 pages of evidence. Marcus submitted a legal memo to the HOA's property management firm, one they couldn't ignore, and demanded an emergency review of the board's actions. Karen responded within 48 hours. She called a special conduct review meeting for February 23rd, open only to board members. But Marcus, citing the Texas Open Meetings Act, filed a request to attend and broadcast it to all homeowners in the neighborhood group chat, which he joined for the first time. His message was brief. Some of you have been asking questions. You deserve answers. I'll be attending Thursday's board meeting with documentation regarding recent fines, bylaws, and procedural violations. If you've ever felt mistreated, silenced, or targeted by HOA leadership, come. It's your neighborhood too. That message did something we hadn't expected. It opened the floodgates. By that evening, we had 11 emails from neighbors. Quiet stories, nervous admissions. One had been cited for a safety violation after requesting a handrail. Another received a fine after turning down Karen's request to host a campaign fundraiser in their living room. And Mrs. Kim, she sent an audio file. A voicemail from Karen dated November 2023. It's best not to speak on matters you don't understand. The board has discretion. You don't want to damage your standing in the community. That same night, I stepped outside just before 10 p.m. Scout followed. And across the street, Marcus stood on his porch, arms folded, nodding like he already knew. Tomorrow, he said, we stop surviving. February 23, 2024, 7:02 p.m. Summit Grove, HOA special meeting, Community Room A. Under fluorescent lights, the room was packed, folding chairs filled, standing room in the back. I counted 38 neighbors. That was more than had attended the summer barbecue. Karen opened the meeting with a thin smile and a printed statement. She read slowly, like someone walking through fog. Her voice cracked once, and I saw her eyes flick toward me. Then Marcus stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He presented. We are here because process matters, because rules must be consistent, and because no one, no matter how long they've served, gets to use power like a sword. He walked them through the violations, the expired incorporation, the altered votes, the city filings. He played the voicemail from Karen, showed the Slack message. Each fact landed like a hammer on stone, and when he was done, he said only, "We're not asking for revenge, we're asking for clarity, and the restoration of a community built on truth, not intimidation." Silence. Then someone clapped, then another, and then the room filled with it. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because power, real power, doesn't shout. It builds. Quietly, brick by brick, file by file, truth by truth. And finally, it stands. The applause in the meeting room didn't last long, but it didn't have to. Because in that short burst, 30 seconds at most, I felt something shift. The way people turned toward Marcus, the way their eyes flicked to me and lingered with understanding instead of suspicion. It was like someone had finally cracked open a window after months of stale air. Karen Middleton stood frozen at the front of the room, gripping her clipboard so tightly I could hear the plastic creak. Her eyes darted across the crowd, looking maybe for backup, but the board members next to her sat still. No nods, no words, just quiet. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then tried again. "Mr. Turner," she began, voice brittle, "has clearly gone to great lengths to mischaracterize." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He just tapped the speaker mic. "Karen, this meeting is being recorded. Please speak carefully." Her cheeks flushed crimson. A vein pulsed near her temple. "You don't have authority here." "Actually," he said calmly, "as a legal representative of a resident facing over $1,000 in fines under contested bylaws, I do, especially given your failure to respond to a certified letter and your pattern of retaliation." He held up a manila folder. "Would you like me to read from the Texas HOA statute, or will you acknowledge receipt of the complaint now?" You could feel the energy in the room, neighbors leaning in, faces alert, some nodding slowly like puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. Karen exhaled sharply. "We'll take that under advisement." But the air had already changed, and she knew it. The next morning, I woke up to 12 emails. 5 were from residents thanking me for speaking up. 3 were from folks I didn't even know well, sharing their own complaints or strange experiences with Karen, each eerily similar to mine. One woman wrote, "I was fined for putting wind chimes on my balcony. Karen said it was a sound hazard. I didn't fight it. I wish I had." The most surprising email came from Jeff Morano, one of the quieter board members. He wrote, "I'm stepping down from the board. I thought we were helping the neighborhood. I didn't realize what it had become. I'm sorry." Marcus was right again. Once the curtains pulled back, it doesn't close the same way. But we weren't finished. March 4th, 2024. That's the date etched into my memory. The board called a full community vote for clarification and ratification of HOA enforcement authority. It was supposed to be a tidy way for Karen to reclaim some semblance of order, maybe spin the whole thing as a misunderstanding. But we had a different plan. Marcus and I canvassed the neighborhood for 5 days straight, not knocking on doors with clipboards or petitions, but showing up with facts, printed packets, annotated bylaws, copies of outdated charters, the voicemail transcript. We didn't make speeches, we had conversations. We didn't call people out, we let them connect the dots. And somewhere in all those mailboxes, handshakes, and late-night driveway chats, the neighborhood woke up. The night of the vote, the community hall was standing room only. Marcus wore a charcoal blazer. I wore jeans and a clean flannel, because I wasn't trying to be anything other than what I was, a neighbor, a man with a porch swing, a dad, a person who just wanted fairness. Karen arrived late. She walked in with 3 papers in her hand and a face fixed into polite defiance, but her usual aura, that tight-lipped command, was gone, replaced by something hollow. She took the podium. I'd like to remind everyone that leadership is not easy, that managing harmony means making hard choices, that change, even uncomfortable change, can be necessary. There were murmurs. Then she said the phrase that undid her. I have always acted in the best interest of this community. That's when Mrs. Kim stood up. Soft-spoken, 73 years old, always in gardening gloves. She didn't raise her voice either, but her words cut cleaner than any legal brief. You threatened me. On my voicemail. I didn't speak up before because I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. She pulled out a printout and handed it to the moderator. Applause didn't follow, just silence. And then one person stood, then another and another. Within 3 minutes, over half the room was standing, not for a speech, not for a fight, but in quiet solidarity. Karen didn't speak again. The vote, 62-5. Karen lost. Not just the motion. The board removed her, by unanimous vote. Even the 2 members who had once backed her abstained. A temporary ethics committee was installed. Marcus was named as its independent legal advisor. I was asked, ironically, to help rewrite the very bylaws that had been used against me. I accepted, not out of revenge, but because I now understood how easily power, when left unexamined, can twist. 3 days later, I found the final envelope, taped to our front door. No note this time, just a voided fine statement with the words, "Resolved, no further action," scribbled in pen. I smiled, and for the first time in 4 months, I took Lena to the garden center. She picked new chalk markers. We bought 3 butterfly plants. Nina picked up solar lanterns, 4 of them, and I didn't ask for permission, because I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, Karen put her house on the market. She didn't say goodbye, but honestly, we didn't expect her to. What mattered was what she left behind. Not fear, not silence, but a neighborhood that finally knew how to stand, together. Karen Middleton's house sold faster than I expected, listed quietly on a Thursday, gone by Monday. She didn't host a farewell gathering, no final stroll down the sidewalk. Just one day, the blinds were drawn, the porch was empty, and the for sale sign vanished like it had never been there. In her place came a couple from Wichita Falls, Jared and Alina Mendoza, newly married, 2 rescue dogs, and a pop-up camper they parked proudly in the driveway. The first time we spoke, Jared said, "We love the vibe here. Feels like a real community, and for tea." First time in a long time, I agreed. The porch swing still creaked in the evenings, but the air felt different now, softer, safer. Scout napped under my feet again. Lena was back to drawing her chalk snowflakes, bigger this time, spanning all 3 front windows. And Nina? She finally added wind chimes to the pergola. They rang like freedom. The new HOA ethics committee met monthly. Marcus served as legal oversight, and the meetings were now open to all residents, recorded, published, and transparent. The committee even implemented a rotating chair system, so no single person held power too long. I wasn't interested in being on the board full-time, but I did help rewrite the compliance procedures, alongside Danielle, Marcus's law clerk, and 3 other neighbors who, months earlier, had barely spoken to one another. We created a resident fairness bill that ensured all complaints had to be accompanied by cited bylaws. Hearings were mandatory before any fines could be issued. Anonymous letters were no longer admissible in enforcement actions. And most importantly, every resident had the right to speak at meetings, without retaliation. That last one was for Mrs. Kim. She came back to life in the spring, started pruning her hydrangeas again. She even brought over a tray of lemon bars for Nina with a note that said, "Thank you for standing." By April 2024, Summit Grove looked the same on the outside. Trimmed lawns, clean sidewalks, kids still raced their scooters past Scout like he was a furry checkpoint. But under the surface, things had changed. We had learned something vital. You don't have to shout to protect your space. You just have to stand firm and shine enough light for others to follow. And when that happens, the silence breaks. The truth echoes. One afternoon, I was sweeping the porch when Marcus walked up the path with a clipboard. He handed it to me. They want to name the revised charter after you," he said. "Call it the Turner Amendment." I laughed. "That sounds like something you'd hear in a courtroom drama." He grinned. "Well, it kinda was." I didn't sign the clipboard right away. I sat with it, thought about what it meant. This journey had started with one accusation, one label I never expected: hostile. Funny how quickly a word can become a shadow, how people who once waved can stop making eye contact, all because of someone else's narrative. But I had changed too. I had learned the difference between anger and strength, between control and accountability. I signed the form. Not to be remembered, but to remember why we fought. Later that week, we hosted another barbecue. This time, Marcus brought ribs. Mrs. Kim brought her lemon bars again. The Mendozas played music from their camper and offered homemade salsa. Lena invited her classmates. The garden club came with little potted starters for everyone: basil, thyme, and cherry tomatoes. And in the middle of it all, under soft white string lights, the wind chimes rang. The same HOA that once fined us for lights now complimented the setup. A new board member even asked Nina for her decor tips. That night, as Scout curled up under the table and the sky darkened into a soft, forgiving purple, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a fight. This was the beginning of peace. Not peace through avoidance, peace through truth. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the city. The HOA, under new leadership, had voluntarily submitted to a city review of its practices, citing our case as a turning point. The review led to a series of workshops now being offered to other HOAs throughout the county, preventing power abuse in residential communities. They asked if Marcus and I would speak at the first one. We agreed, not because we wanted a spotlight, but because if our mess could prevent another family from going through what we did, then maybe the poor-een. Which swing had always been meant to hold more than just one story. I still have the original violation letters, not because I hold a grudge, but because every once in a while, someone new moves in. Someone who hears whispers or catches a strange look and starts to wonder if they're next. That's when I show them the stack of papers. Then I hand them a copy of the new charter. And then I say, "You're not alone. You never were. You just needed to see the light hit the cracks." Closure doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through wind chimes, through butterfly gardens, through neighbors who wave again, and through a voice that once trembled, but chose to keep speaking anyway. Closing line options. Pick your favorite for the final script narration. They called me hostile for asking questions. Turns out the real threat was daylight, and we let it in. What started as a $150 fine became the blueprint for taking our neighborhood back. Karen tried to silence me, but Marcus hit record, and the truth spoke louder than either of us ever could. They counted on my silence. They forgot who lived next door. If you've ever been labeled, cornered, or silenced just for standing your ground, you're not alone. And if you've ever had to fight for your home, your name, or your peace, I see you. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to record the truth just to be heard? And let me know where you're watching from, because sometimes the quietest neighbor is the one who brings the whole story to light. Like, share, and subscribe, because on this channel, the truth doesn't stay buried.